So my family is here, and that's my youngest son. He's 6, he's about 6 months older than my father was on Kristallnacht when my father was in Berlin on this day. My father remembers being in the back of of Gustav Klunken's Gestapo command car. That's the family story. So Gustav Klunken's, the movie Mephisto is about him. He was a German actor who was sort of given prominence by the Nazis, even though he wasn't ideologically Nazi. And that tells you something about what Kristallnacht was. It was a demarcation point before which German Jews felt that they still could have contact if they were elite, like my family was, like my German family was. They still could have contact with their German non-Jewish friends. The focus on Kristallnacht is itself, when we think about the meaning of Kristallnacht, it's a bit puzzling because far more German Jews survived than, say, Polish Jews. So sometimes my wife and I will argue about, why I focus so much. My mother was Polish Jewish, lived through the war in Poland and Russia, saw brutal things, but they were always impoverished, whereas my father's family were incredibly assimilated. They were Germans living in the middle of Berlin. My father used to watch Nazi parades and ask his nanny why he couldn't join them. They felt German. So what is it about that seems so tragic, seems so intense? And I think, for me, it's the fact of, truly feeling assimilated. It's the sense that you could be ripped apart from your society now. German Jews were deeply assimilated, much more so than Polish Jews. And then they found it hard to believe what they were going to face. Unlike Polish Jews, they tended to have more assets and resources. But it's a time after which my father remembers nothing but fear. So I'm going to read I'm going to conclude by reading, this is my grandmother's memoir, The Unforgotten, published in 1957. So she was, my great-grandfather was the cantor of the Fasanenstrasse synagogue, the head cantor for its entire existence. I was the largest congregation in Germany, in Berlin. And my grandmother was an actor. She was in the movie Metropolis. And she also, so this is her description. She also was involved in underground work, saving people from Sachsenhausen. And all of that stopped after Kristallnacht. After Kristallnacht, the sense, all of her book before Kristallnacht is about trying to convince her fellow German Jews how dangerous it is and that they have to leave. And after Kristallnacht, as Toby said, everybody knew they had to leave. That was the point of Kristallnacht. Now, I need to, before we focus on the German Jewish population, you need to, Kristallnacht, the cause of it was Ernst von Rath, was a German diplomat, was killed by a Polish, by a Jewish, a young teenager, Polish Jewish teenager, right after the Germans had decided to expel all the stateless Jews in Germany, including his parents. And so then he killed the German diplomat Ernst von Rath. My great-grandparents had dinner with Ernst von Rath's parents the night before Kristallnacht. This is a very intensely personal connection, and in part I want to convey how recent this is. And they were horrified by what was happening. But all of the stateless Polish Jews who were sent to Poland by Germany ended up dying. So Kristallnacht is very much about the last population of Jews under Germany finally realizing what is happening. And finally, the rest of the German population. What I learned from my grandmother's book is that everybody had, German Jews all had non-Jewish friends. who would like, oh, these are the ones I take care of. Kristallnacht is the end of that, where you just... So that's the background. Anti-Semitism is shot in Paris, and she's with the head of the Berlin Jewish community, and the radio, and listening to the radio. The body of the young Baron von Rath will be brought to Berlin for burial. As we reported before, Baron von Rath, who was shot in Paris by a Jew, succumbed to his injuries this evening. We can't indict the Jew in Paris. He is out of our reach. But the German people demand justice for this crime committed against one of their finest young men. The German people demand that the Jews in Germany pay for the murder of an innocent man. They demand full vengeance for this unbelievable crime, an impudent provocation of world Jewry against the German people. We accept the challenge and answer it with the just indignation that rises in every German heart against the Jewish murderers. I had heard enough. The German heart is rising up, I said disgustedly. The shrill ring of the telephone interrupted my sentence. For a second, Mr. Gross, the head of the president of the Berlin Jewish community, looked at me, frightened, as I never thought he would be. He hesitated. There was a second ring. He picked up the receiver. Yes, he said, and then cleared his throat. Who is it? What? I watched him. I wanted to ask, but at that moment, the other phone started ringing. Before Mr. Gross could prevent me, I picked it up. For a moment, I did not grasp the message. Someone yelled and sobbed into the phone. But as confirmation of it, I saw outside the window a red glow light up the darkness. The voice on the phone cried out something like, Coppolas. My house was on fire. So I grew up with a picture of the Fasanenstraße synagogue on our wall, the big synagogue in Berlin that Kaiser Wilhelm had given to the Jews of Germany, and we used to call it my house, even when I was growing up. I turned to Mr. Gross. He had picked up the first phone for a second time and stood listening with a completely helpless expression. My house is burning, and there, I tried to motion toward the window where the red glow became brighter. Not that, not the temples. Not only that one, said Mr. Gross, and I saw the tears coursing down his face. The Prinzenstraße too, Ilse. So then they rush to the Fasanenstraße temple. We turned into Fasanenstraße, parked and ran toward the temple. It had almost disappeared into the blinding smoke, but fire blazed from the cupolas and lit up the sky with a red glare. People surged around, restrained by SA men. I did not really comprehend everything, but the details seared themselves into my memory. Some women must have located the sacramental wine. They were pouring it on the flames while they sang the Horst Wessel song. When the blood of the Jews shall spray from our knives, they screamed, leaping wildly. I've seen that before, I thought. Where have I seen that before? Of course, in films of the French Revolution, when they danced around the guillotine. Okay, so I don't know what, I've thought about what the moral of Kristallnacht is my whole life. I think it's too soon to be able to report anything. But I think for me, it's the closest experience to connecting, given how assimilated I grew up, and the sense of disconnecting from a community that you just can't believe that you're no longer part of. All right, now let's.
On the night of November the 9th, 1938, synagogues all over the Third Reich were set ablaze. The German population watched as people were brutally bullied and homes and businesses were ravaged.
This was the day on which we realized that things were getting serious. It was the first sign that they had it in for the Jews.
Jewish culture in Germany was virtually destroyed. Invaluable treasures were lost. The barbarism displayed by the National Socialists destroyed even the last dregs of faith in a civilized society in Germany.
In the broad sense, I look back on it, many of us do, and we think that it was the opening shot of the Holocaust.
Hello, everyone. I'm Netanel Crisp. I'm a first year in Grace Hopper. I guess just kind of reflective thoughts on what we just saw. So probably similar to many of you, as a Jew, the Holocaust has, of course, extreme bearing and meaning on my life. My entire mother's family was massacred in Lithuania with only one survivor, so it's something that is extremely devastating. Of course, and watching a film like this, hearing from survivors and hearing these firsthand accounts always reminds us of the horrors that were committed and the level of inhumane treatment and indignity that was carried out against our families and our people and just general citizens and human beings. And it's astonishing to recognize, especially when we get to see these images and hear these stories, how recent these events are, and then reflecting upon them and recognizing that these trends are persisting even today, and that this isn't something that's left only in the past, but something that unfortunately has been carried out throughout all of Jewish history and can be traced 2,000 years from the Holocaust to the Inquisition to pogroms to the Crusades. And it's something that we have to continuously strive to overcome and to defeat and to ensure that it stops now and here and today. So yeah, thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Alexei. I'm a second-year college student at Grace Hopper from Ukraine. And what I noticed about something interesting about this movie and what it shows about Nazism and extremism in general is that at the beginning they were attacking Jewish shops to threaten Jews so that they can escape the country. Then they put those Jews in concentration camps, but they're not killing huge amounts as they were killing afterwards, so that these Jews agreed to leave the country. And a lot of Jews did leave the country. And Nazis were not satisfied with this result. And they continued to threaten more and more up to the point that they killed all the Jews. And what I noticed about, what I find insightful about this is that we should not be making concessions to any extremist ideologies, believing that, oh, okay, it happens once, they're satisfied, you're good. It's not going to be like that. It'll be, we give in now, they're going to ask for more tomorrow, we give once more, and it will be to the extent that there is nothing more to give in because they're just killing everyone on an industrial basis. And right now, we have a lot of such ideologies, still very bad in the world, and we shouldn't be giving in to them anymore. And we should putting a very, very hard no all the time when they want something.
Hi, my name is Jack Klinger. I'm a senior in Berkeley College. Coming here as someone who's who's familiar with the history, but not incredibly well versed in it. I was just surprised by the level of this evil being incredibly state sanctioned. I came in with the impression that it was a popular movement, some sort of riot, disturbance, but it wasn't that at all. Very organized. The hatred of not just religion, but an entire people, where they were talking about homes being destroyed, personal property being destroyed, being told to leave the country. Just this level of evil separating, I guess, a nation from their national identity completely, something that can never be really stitched back together. It's a powerful moment, powerful in the level of evil.
Hi everyone, I'm Tasman Rosenfeld, a senior in Berkeley College as well, member of Shabtai. I think what was most shocking to me about this documentary was the the clear complacency, you know, it's like so much of this was state sanctioned, but the clear complacency of the general public, you know, these videos of kind of people just like standing around and watching synagogues burn, is a extremely poignant reminder of our duty as citizens, not to be casual bystanders to injustices that we see, and reminds us that when we see injustices taking place, it's absolutely our responsibility to step in and put an end to it, right? Like no concessions, as you said, and you know, this goes for violence against Jews, but violence against all people everywhere. So yeah, let this be a lesson to us.
Hello everyone, my name is Isaac. I'm a freshman in Poly College. I come from Panama. One of the things, I have many points in mind, but one of them is like, what's Kristallnacht? So we saw the movie and everything, and when we saw like the Holocaust, it happened later, like we may think, yeah, this is nothing compared to the Holocaust and the concentration camps. But in reality, like, I believe this is one of the most important events. Why? Because this was the turning point. This was the event. This was the event when, like, you know, it's too late, right? And why I'm bringing this point? Because we see death and we see like, oh, 6 million Jews or this amount of Jews. We see like numbers, only numbers. But what if we take those numbers and instead of like 4,000, 6 million, we see 1 plus 1 plus 1, life for after plus life. We start seeing things differently and the magnitude of these events. So I do think like we should not only see this event as something like it just happened, an event, it's nothing compared to the Holocaust. We should see it with as significance, with what's so important. This is what led to that. And yeah, I think we should think more about that. And to finish, I'm always, something that really impresses me and like shocks my mind is basically, we see Germany. If you have taken a philosophy class or anything, the most important thinkers in history came from Germany, right? These Germans in 1940s were one of the most capable people in the world, doctors, engineers. It's just like so amazing, but in the negative way, to see how these people who were so capable, instead of using their abilities, they use them to destroy people, to destroy a nation, to destroy. I mean, it's crazy to think it that way. And we're right here, we're in Yale University, one of the most important universities in the world. We are like studying, we are training ourselves to become people just like they were, the most important people in the intellectual realm, the most important thinkers, important doctors. And I think it's something we should consider and be responsible, take a duty that instead of doing what they did, use our abilities to do something good to the world. Because imagine if the Nazis, instead of doing that, if they would have built bridges among people, they would have solved the world's most important problems, where would we have been now? So something to think about that. Very sad.
So Du Bois, in his 1946 book, The World in Africa, starts out by saying the model of civilization was Germany, the great universities, and then he says, look at what civilization is.
My name is Aaron Shore. I'm a Yale College sophomore from Jerusalem, Israel. And I want to kind of build upon both Isaac's and Tasman's points and think about duty to resist injustice. We saw these scenes in the film, right? You see this like drunk, angry mob burning the synagogues, and you know the fire department is helping them, making sure that they really burn down, and the police are there to make sure that no one interferes with what they're doing. That is clearly not the moment to speak up against injustice. Or obviously it is a moment, but it's not the moment. When all political opposition has been, thrown into concentration camps, and the entire state is directed at these specific efforts to get rid of Jews in Germany. That's not when you can push back against it. The moment to push back against it is well before that, right? This is 5.5 years into the Nazi rule. The moment to stop it was well before Kristallnacht. And I think everyone should sort of take a moment to think about when that moment could have been and how people could have spotted it and what ordinary people could have done in order to stop it. Because clearly they all failed to do it, right? The people like sitting there watching, it's not like they can get up and like do anything about it. They'll get thrown into the next cell at Dachau with the Jewish men that are being rounded up. So I think the lesson from Kristallnacht is to think about the process they got there and not the actual moment that compels people to act.
Hey everyone, my name is Kyle. I'm a senior in Davenport. It's a really heavy night, and there's a lot of serious and devastating emotion that goes into it. Kristallnacht for me has it's a strange day, and for my family, my grandmother wrote a book a few years ago about my family's history in I forget the name. The name of the town starts with an R, but the book's called Good Neighbors, Bad Times, and we talk a lot about the moment isn't to act on the night of Kristallnacht, but in my grandma's neighborhood, it was the people who did act that saved our family's lives. It was a town that was very civil between Jews and Christians, and they helped take all the Torahs out of the synagogues before they burned down, and they helped get all the Jews to safety. And watching this documentary, the moment that stuck with me the most is the guy who is surprised that the memory that stuck with him the most is the car burning, not the synagogue burning, it's the car burning, because it is so much harder to hate people than it is to hate ideas. And we are like, it's hard when you actually think about the people, when you think about the 6 million individuals, it's so much heavier, and you can't even grasp 6 million individuals because you can barely grasp one. But I think just remembering how human their evil was, but how compassionate some humans could be, is really important. And how, because we can't speak for ideologies here or anywhere, but we can speak for what we do and who we are. And I thank those Germans daily for my life, who saved my family, because if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be here, and we all wouldn't be, and well, not we all, but my family wouldn't be here. And remembering that it's not about ideologies, and at the end of the day, it can't be about theory or thought or what you stand for or who you believe in. It has to be about who you are and what you as a you will do, not you as a collective, because yeah, we can say we have to fight justice and we have to do blank, but unless you are actively doing it and you are going against the grain to save some people who you might not even agree with, but they're people, and you can recognize that. And I think keeping that in the back of your mind when you watch all of this horrible footage of people very easily destroying buildings and furniture and goods, but when you put it in terms of a person going to another person's home, your neighbor's home, and destroying them because of things that they believe, and just negating all the rest of the humanness that goes on in their lives, that's the horror. And in a world that's more digital and removed than ever, maintaining that humanism is the only thing I want to leave you with on a somewhat of a positive, because it's a tough night, but we need positives because otherwise it's just too tough. And remembering to just be human, and regardless of beliefs or needs, I think, to me is a positive I want to make sure you remember in this really night of serious tragedy for Jews. Thanks.
Hi everybody, I'm Quinn. I'm a second year in Jonathan Edwards, and I would echo what everybody has said tonight. And thank you all for your incredible words tonight. I was thinking a lot about what Professor Stanley and Toby were talking about at the beginning of the night, with regards to the idea of assimilation, and the fact that assimilation will not save you. This idea of assimilation is obviously something that I think has been pushed on a lot of subjugated groups throughout history, ourselves included. And so I think that this night being evidence of that not working, assimilation not saving you or being capable of saving you, is yet another reason to be grateful for and actively protect and celebrate your people and your religion and your community. And so on that note, on perhaps another positive note, I'm very grateful, especially after watching this documentary, to have the opportunity to watch it and partake in it with all of you and partake in that remembrance with all of you. So thank you to everybody.
Hi, my name is Richard. I'm a sophomore at Yale College, and there are just a couple things I want to speak on. First of all, this story, I should have known it in more depth than I did. It's a story of how my family ended up half in Israel and half in the United States. And I, of course, knew the base details, but the fact that I didn't know it further is sort of shameful to me, so I'm committed to learning even more. And a couple other things. Further on the note of assimilation, as the professor noted, your family was well integrated into German society, and from a superficial level, Jews could be considered to not be so different from the non-Jewish population in Germany, and yet look at how that ended up. So imagine how much easier it is to otherize people who look different or have even more different religions than we do. And it's important to be really conscious of that, and also of the fact that fascism always needs an enemy to sort of justify its existence. So if it's not you, it's just not you yet. So at any point when you see the thinking, I think the poem goes, first they came for the Jews, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a Jew. Then they came for the communists, and so on and so on. And then when it was my turn, there was no one to speak for me. So, whenever you see this type of thinking, including in your own mind, it's important to confront it immediately.
I'm not a Jew, but I speak as a citizen of the world, and in particular from my background as an artist. Many years ago, I was playing a new piece of work that was titled March to Oblivion, and the composer had hidden the Horst Wessel lead into this piece. But when he was telling us about the origins and the motivations for this piece, he told us nothing about the actual intent of the music and told us it can be about anything and tried to make light of it. But why? Why was he ashamed to hide the actual roots of the music that we were playing? Yes, we were kids. I was only 15 at the time, but 15's not too young an age to learn about the horrors that happen in the world. But one thing that I learned from this lesson, one thing that I learned as an artist, is the importance of culture. When you want to destroy an identity, the easiest way to do so is by destroying culture. We saw this in the documentary. They destroyed architecture. They destroyed people. They separated families. You destroy the units that make a culture what it is. You wed off figureheads. You imprison them. You take the language. You take their books. You take the culture that makes them unique. But here's another thing, one thing that has been echoed by, I think, everyone who has come at this mic today. When people remove culture, we cannot be apathetic to that. This is why us, as citizens of the world, it's not just about learning history, it's not just about learning what happens here, it's about being appreciative of cultures that we might not understand, that we might never understand, but to understand that they exist, and these differences exist, but we can coexist even then. So I ask you today, don't just be citizens of the world, be appreciative of the cultures around you, and be artists of the world. Thank you.
So something that was touched on earlier in the documentary was this concept of leaving, and my family was Ashkenazi Jewish from Czechoslovakia, and we left very early on in World War II, and because of that, we lost our Jewish history and all of our memory, our language, everything, and now I just think of myself as an American, and to do the work of like learning my family's history, I have to watch documentaries like this. And so when we think about why people were so resistant to leave in the first place, I just think it's key to remember all of the aspects of what you have to leave when you're forced by such hatred and evil. So.
Hi, my name is Brady. I'm a public health student here in the grad program. I think the big takeaway from this documentary for me was one of resistance, and resistance really at all costs. You can't tell by my diminutive stature, but I am quite a bit Dutch. My grandfather is Dutch, my great-grandfather was Dutch. I'm the shortest person in my family by quite a bit. It's a real drag. But one of my proudest family possessions is a diary that my great-grandfather kept. My grandfather was born in 1941, right as the war was wrapping up. So when he immigrated to Canada, one of the very few possessions that he was able to take with him was his father's diary. And a third of the diary or so, once translated, was revealed to talk about how my great-grandfather was a flower merchant, had large greenhouses in Alsmeer, just outside of Amsterdam. And at the start of the war, he converted everything to a greenhouse for vegetable growing, because nobody wanted to buy tulips in the middle of a war. And because he was an able-bodied man, they tried to conscript him into the war. So the Nazis would send the men around to gather the young men and to take them away to war, and he wanted to avoid this. So he has journal entries that he wrote that are smudged with coal because he had his wife bury him under their coal pile. He'd built a little box for himself, and it was really more of a coffin. I later saw pictures of it. It's just sort of a horrendous thing to think of trying to stuff yourself in there. But instead of fleeing the country, he felt like it was his duty to resist and to fight. And and this is sort of apocryphal, who knows if this is true, but he had a list of some of the families in hiding that he was delivering food to. And he was delivering to a Frank family in Amsterdam, and who knows if it's the famous one or not. But I think about the sacrifices that everybody who didn't stay for themselves, who stayed for others, who suffered for themselves. He ended up being captured and killed. He wasn't Jewish, but he was an ally, and so they took his life. And my grandfather never got to meet his dad. And I think about what it means to not stand by, like Taz was talking about, to witness the synagogue on fire, to witness the cupola coming down, and to decide that it's worth the burns, to perhaps not repeat those same mistakes. It's a hard thing to do in the moment, but something that maybe we could all keep a journal about and try and maintain this idea that it is our responsibility.
Hi everyone, I'm Michael. I am a first-year MBA at the School of Management. I've seen a lot of Holocaust and World War II documentaries, so I guess my mind was really focused on the ending here, and just how unsatisfying I felt. That we see the progression of how everything unfolds, the climax, we understand what happened during the Holocaust, and then the end is that a bunch of people spent a lot of money to rebuild the synagogue for really nobody to come back and use, to basically serve as sort of a monument to what used to be. Willing to fly a man back to go and see it, which he declined, as he also felt a lack of a connection with it. And I think for me, sort of if your takeaway after watching the whole documentary is to rebuild the synagogue brick for nobody to show up and use it, like, it sort of speaks to the fact that if we don't figure out what the right takeaway is, or what a good takeaway is, and a good next step really is coming out of it, that we are going to make a lot of the same mistakes, and that's really scary. And so it's certainly been very heartening to hear so many great observations and takeaways of things that we need to collectively understand, that if we're going to go back and go through the exercise to look at what happened, to be able to figure out how we can identify things in the current society that could lead that way and to prevent them, that we don't make the same mistakes. But I think at least the ending to me really is a warning that that's not the ending we want to be from this. So.
My name is Jackson, also first year in Yale College. I guess the thing that I've been thinking about most is just more of like how I fit into this, you know, as being like a Jew a lot later. And I feel like a bit guilty seeing like how many people like lost their lives for practicing a religion that I have a really casual relationship with. And at the same time, like, I think about like just how lucky I am to be in a time where I can freely practice like such an amazing religion in a place that's like so beautiful without the fear of like, without any fear at that matter. And like just how important it is for all of us to just like, aside from the politics or whatever, like just to be appreciative of the fact that we have this and we can do this together. And I don't know, I just felt like, you know, people did a lot for me to practice Judaism. I should be practicing more, you know?
Let me be clear. You would have been a target whether you practiced or not. It had nothing to do with practice. It had to do with the Nazi anti-Semitism. The Jews were the communist elite. You know, the atheists. It's I mean, the Nazi anti-Semitism was directed against the most assimilated, the leftist elite. You know, this model. It didn't help, as you know, right?
Of course.
It's there were German. I mean, I'm German Jewish. I mean, on my father's side, and a tradition of German Judaism is to be, you know, part of the country, liberal, university, you know, involved in you know, part of the great German culture and civilization. That side of my family is very much like that, and so it was targeting that too. It was targeting, you know, leftist, communist homosexuals who supposedly were, you know, Hitler blamed feminism on Jews. But, yeah.
And aren't we lucky to be at a time where that's not what's happening to us, right?
Professor Stanley, you actually came to my norms. I'm Jamie, I'm a sophomore, Yale College. Professor Stanley actually came to my Norms and Deviance course in the spring of last semester. So I was just reflecting on some of the ideas that you brought to that course, particularly something in your book about how important it is to look at the label makers themselves. Like one thing I was reflecting on is just how important it is to make sure that the people in power who, you know, we both select and don't select, we need to recognize that they have a huge, you know, power to make labels and shape perceptions. And so I just was reflecting on how important it is to make sure that the groups that we think as deviant in society, are they actually deviant, or are they being, you know, socially constructed by our leaders? So that was something I was reflecting on, just to take away with, is how important it is that people in power who, you know, we see are you know, label makers. And I think that was like a huge point that I took away from your book, and I really appreciated that in the spring. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, Germany was the least anti-Semitic country in Europe in 1932. It was France that you would expect, the Holocaust, if anything. So it's a story, insofar as we think about this as about being about German Jews, since the Germans had already brutalized the Austrian Jews, the Polish population. I mean, it's about, you know, this concept of assimilation and this concept of, turning again. My grandmother, they wanted to do a movie about her in the 1950s, and she refused because the movie made Germans look bad. That was, which, my Polish Jewish mother does not have that view about Poland.
Hi everyone, my name is Anna. I just wanted to, it's very interesting to hear all of the people talking about kind of what the flashpoint was, or as far as the point that should have been identified when a bystander could have actually had an effect. And this is something that I've thought about quite a bit in my studies of World War II in general. I remember taking a class my first year at Yale that talked about Nazi aesthetics and kind of the use of aesthetics to turn a very normal population against people, and particularly like what just came up as far as like whether you're practicing Jew or not, you would still be a target. It gets to the point of how nonsensical it is, because Judaism is a religion, right? There are ethnic lines, but something I've always wondered is, would the Nazis even consider someone who converted at the last second? Would they be taken to a concentration camp because they wouldn't fit the constraints that there was this ethnicity that was subverting everything that Germany stood for? But that's kind of beside the point. What I am curious about, and I'm wondering if anyone has an answer to, also historians in the room, is there an agreed upon turning point? Because something that I think is interesting, even being in college today, I'm a philosophy major, and pretty much every class that deals with anything evil, like World War II and Nazism, is such an easy example. Kind of like anytime someone needs an example of evil, they say, oh, Hitler. And it's so easy now to look back on, like I've checked out Mein Kampf from the library a couple of times, and I've only made it through like a couple passages, and they're insane. And it's just so easy for us now to kind of see the thread, but I'm wondering if there's an agreed upon point where things did change, because when we're talking about now, we need to look out for these kinds of warning signs. I really don't know when it's clear, and sometimes in the modern day, I hear things kind of likened to World War II, and it can be borderline offensive because it seems like it's a totally different thing, but I don't know. Maybe that I'm missing these kinds of warning signs that are really important. So this, I don't know, all of your reflections as well as the film have kind of made me want to look into this more and see if there was a more reasonable point where it was clear that things were heading in this direction or not. But overall, enriching experience, and I would also like to thank everyone for their words tonight.
I'm not a historian, and I shamefully don't know enough about the history of the Holocaust and anti-Semitism in Germany in the early 1900s, but my initial gut response to your question was oh, what's the turning point? Or my initial response is, as soon as you recognize, right, as soon as you realize that there's some injustice happening, like some group is being singled out, or where you see any kind of violent rhetoric being directed towards a group, that's when it's our responsibility to step in and take action, right? I don't think that it's practical or reasonable to make arguments about at this point, once things start getting this bad is when, duty to step in, and, when it's your duty to step in, it's as soon as you realize that something evil is taking place, right, that's when you as an individual step up. So, when that was, anti-Semitism had been taking place for decades, longer, all across Europe, right? So the seeds have been sown for quite a long time.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Caroline. I'm a senior in Davenport. Thank you all so much for coming tonight, and for those of you who have spoken, I'm just really amazed. I usually have a lot to say. Tonight, I just can't get past the nausea. I don't really have much of an intellectual take or any sage advice, but the words you've all said is amazing. I guess something that I definitely am happy Shmuel gave me the opportunity to say this is I hope we take this movie and the lessons of this memorial as a reminder to protect our spaces. I look at the doorposts of this building and I think of the doorposts of my grandma's house, and I think of how the Jews marked the doorposts with blood so that they could protect their firstborn sons and during Passover. There are very few places on the planet where anyone can be accepted depending on where you are. And I just feel very thankful that I live in a place where I feel safe. But it's important to protect those places. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Aya. I'm a senior in Pauli Murray. And I think one thing that I was thinking about in particular throughout the entire movie is how this very important narrative that is, you know, about one of the most fundamental things that we should care about, human life, gets lost primarily in like, I think the sphere of education. I mean, here at Yale, we should be very thankful to have like this amazing faculty, but my personal experience like with middle school or high school history classes is that this narrative gets really lost under like the themes of glory around, oh, we won World War II, our country's so great, we beat the Germans, but you know, what happens after? So when I was still in Russia in middle school, it was the same exact narrative, oh, you know, the Soviet Union was so great, so many people went to die for the cause of defeating Germans, but it's never, you know, this narrative is never portrayed at its core. You know, this vile act is never mentioned. It's all like kind of under this veil of there was an evil, nobody's quite sure of what it is, but this doesn't matter because the most important thing is that our country is great, that we went and we won against them. And the same exact narrative I received when I went to high school here in Indiana, just from a different standpoint, from an American standpoint. I don't know, I'm sure that there are much better high schools than mine or middle schools that have taught the extensive history of everything. But I also know that I definitely did not go to the worst schools out there. And even if 50% of high schools are not teaching this, I think that, you know, even in this generation, it's very easy to get these themes either misconstrued or just lost completely under that narrative. So movies like that really help bring that all to light, and I think that's important, especially, you know, about all the things that we talked about not repeating the same things again. So I'm glad that these kind of movies exist.
Hi, my name is Israel Yolu. I'm in Davenport. I'm a senior. I think one of my takeaways from this is it's like the strength and resilience of the Jewish people. As was mentioned several times earlier, they've been persecuted for centuries leading up to this all over Western Europe, culminating in the Holocaust. And one of the fascinating things is just throughout this time, they're able to hold on to their beliefs, hold on to traditions, and fight through it. Yeah, it's kind of hard to like watch this kind of stuff, but yeah, and even today you still see like anti-Semitism, but like yeah, the resilience is something that's like always fascinated me. Yeah. And you see like several threads coming out of the Holocaust, where some like, I guess, lost faith, others kept faith. You see this in the form of like Elie Wiesel, I think his name, or Weiss. Elie Wiesel. And then you have like Viktor Frankl on the other end, where you have these individuals really wrestling with what it means to be Jewish and like their relationship with God. You said earlier it wasn't necessarily a matter of their faith, just being Jewish got you killed. But I think it's a very important matter that they're able to like go back to these events and really wrestle with it, because it keeps it in the minds of people and it prevents this kind of stuff from happening again. I think one of the things that we saw is like with the German society, they're 5.5 years in, leading into 1938, the society had been so socially engineered to accepting this hatred that Kristallnacht was like, it wasn't a crazy idea for them. But in the case of the Jews and us today, what we can do to prevent that sort of social engineering is look back at history and really like wrestle with what happened and ask questions. Again, like Frankl and at least I think that's how we prevent this kind of stuff from happening again, and that's how we maintain a sense of identity and strong culture. So, yeah.
Oh, you want to go? Yeah. Unless you, you want to go generally? I'll just quickly say, because it's a theme that returns, this distinction versus assimilationist idea that we face, we American Jews, and all of us face in America. You know, how much to retain in your group or how much to assimilate. And the Nazi ideology targeted the Jews because they said the Jews had this idea, were leading to this idea that lots of different people could live together in the same society. So the very assimilationist idea that you could have Jews in a society with non-Jews, that's the idea that the Jews were behind that, is Nazi ideology. So the role of assimilation is part of what we have to think about, and part of what we have to defend, because that's what was under attack, not just this identity.
That's actually really similar to what I was thinking about. Ooh, my voice, sorry. I was thinking about the professor's story about how his family had become very successfully assimilated into German culture. And assimilation is something I've been thinking about. I immigrated to the United States when I was really young. My grandmother was an illiterate rice farmer, and I was thinking about how much of a success story of assimilation that my own life has been, the arc. Sorry, I'm Serena, I'm a junior at Yale. And I think that there's so much that's lost or purposefully shed in high-achieving minorities, especially immigrants. You change your name to be easier to pronounce. You send your children to English schools. My parents never spoke English around me. They only spoke English around me growing up because they were afraid that I would speak English with an accent, and that would make me less employable or less appealing to higher education and high schools and other things like that. And I think that one of the lessons that I've sort of taken from this is that someone earlier said like assimilation can't save you. And I think that that's true. And I think that like at a certain point, there's no erasing that fundamental difference that other people or like structures of power will see in you. And there's like something wonderful that's lost and like running away from your heritage. And that's something like I've sort of like arrived at recently, having sort of run as hard and fast as I could away from the place I came from. But yeah, I'm like
really grateful today to be here with all of you and to give things another shot. Yeah, thanks so much.
Hi, I'm Leah, and I'm shy. I've been trying to think about what everybody else is saying and see what I want to say. First of all, I thank you very much for sharing, and thank you for having me. So my father's parents were both Holocaust survivors. My father's father was from Poland. All of his family was killed in 1942. And my grandmother was a Hungarian Jew, and she had a few members of her family survive. And I was telling Toby about this a couple weeks ago, but every year at the Passover Seder, my grandmother would come, and it was the worst time. She would come and she would cry. And I hated it. I wish she wouldn't come, because her father, like I just imagine this, like we're sitting in our house. My parents have a house in the suburbs, right? And then all of a sudden there was a knock on the door, and they literally came and took her father. And like I just imagine that the police that we rely on here would just come and turn against us and take our family members. And that's what happened. So when I'm watching this, I'm thinking, okay, we live in this beautiful, wonderful country that my father always says, in Hebrew he says, Medinat Chesed, that it's like a charitable state, and that we're so lucky that we live here. And that when his father survived and he came here, he encouraged all of his children to achieve higher education and to go to school. And my grandfather actually, after Auschwitz, after he was there for 5 years, went to Columbia to get a PhD, because he said, where else does a Jew in this world have this opportunity? And so I don't have a specific family connection to this, but to what we saw here, but I see it as a Jewish national connection. And what's very important is that I see that when people on the outside are saying we're all Jews and we're all the same, then we, at least as Jews from the inside, need to find places of Jewish unity. Like we have here in this room a variety of backgrounds, of education, of observance. Some people are not observant, some people are very observant, and when the outsiders see us as all the same, at the very least we can't have infighting, we all have to have more unity. So that's the first point. And then the second point is that, like, when we see things that are happening to other groups, that we need to stand up for those people and make sure that those things don't happen to them, because we know what it's like to be victims of just persecution for no reason whatsoever. Okay, thank you.
Hey everyone, my name is Cameron. I am a sophomore in the college from New York. And so I think a lot of what I was taking away from this has already been touched on. But something I was just thinking about is sort of an experience I had, I think, a week and a half ago. So I, grew up in New York. Being Jewish was sort of just like second nature. It was just something. Surrounded by it everywhere. So it, honestly, up until sort of when I started going to Yale, didn't feel very special. It just felt like, yeah, part of my identity. So it was part of everyone else's, cool. But then I got to Yale, and that was the first time I sort of encountered people who had never met Jews before. This was like a crazy phenomenon. Like, what do you mean you didn't go to high school with any Jewish, classmates? Like, how is that even possible? But then, obviously, when you think about it, it makes sense. And so last week, I was talking to one of my friends, and I said, yeah, no, do you have any fun Thanksgiving plans? She said, oh yeah, I'm going home to see my family. How about you? Do you celebrate Thanksgiving? I was like, what? Obviously I celebrate Thanksgiving. In fact, we celebrate Thanksgiving and read the new Colossus every single Thanksgiving. And I think sort of that combined with this made me realize, a lot of people have touched on how lucky, Jews are to live in a country where not only are they free to just celebrate, but also, be proud of their identity, but also sort of made me realize how important it is to educate other people about your identity, and not just to take it as, something that you are and something that you do in your free time, but more that, being willing and proud to show it to other people, and show that, there are different ways that people live, and, these are some of the universal aspects of it that we can all come together and bring it as a unifying force. So.
Hi everyone, I'm Katrina, and I'm I am glad to be invited. It's a strange word to use on a night like this. I think one of the themes that resonated with me from the wonderful comments we've had is the idea of the complacency of the observers that we see in the documentary. And I think it's even more than complacency. I think it's this, and someone will correct me if I say this wrongly, Schadenfreude. This idea that you take pleasure in the suffering of somebody else. And I think that it's something we should probably think of more in our own day, is this idea that sometimes people we don't like, we don't agree with, something happens and we take, we think, well, this person has different political views or different opinions, and, well, maybe they had it coming, And I think that what moments like this show is that it's a dangerous emotion, Schadenfreude. It's a dangerous thing to feel, and we should catch ourselves if we ever feel it, and reflect on the bystanders. And then another thing I wanted to say, and that's something that sort of, I feel guilty saying it because it takes away a little bit from the main theme of the evening, but I feel compelled to say it. I'm from Russia. And the idea of the glorious narrative of this victory in the Second World War in Russia, I think, is a little different than it is in the US. Because in Russia, this is a narrative that allowed people, the oppressive regime, to subsume in that glory the repressions that were happening in the country at the time. Things like the Holodomor, which was something that happened in the Ukraine. So I guess I just wanted to make this minor point because I felt compelled to, and I didn't want to bring it up because I think it may make us feel uncomfortable. And then I reflected on the lessons of tonight and thought, well, perhaps sometimes we should address uncomfortable things. So, thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Alex. I'm actually a 6th-year PhD student in biomedical engineering, so I've been here for quite a while. So my grandfather was a Holocaust survivor from Romania, though at the time they didn't really have a national identity. They were living in a border town, the border of Hungary, and they were kind of not really under any jurisdiction, and that flip-flopped a lot between Hungary and Romania, and it didn't really matter in the end. So his brother was conscripted into the Russian army and eventually went to a labor camp in Russia, while he ended up in a concentration camp in Germany. And there's this crazy story of how they eventually reunited after his brother emigrated to Israel and he emigrated to the US. And so the place where he settled was Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And I grew up in Pittsburgh. And about 3 years ago, almost very close, about a couple of weeks ago to this date, there was about 2 blocks from where I grew up, a shooter entered a synagogue on Shabbat and killed people from my community based on ideas that were very similar to the ideas that the Nazis held. And it scared me profoundly because I grew up went to a Jewish school growing up, blocks away from this synagogue. I had been to this synagogue many times, friends, bar and bat mitzvahs there, and just seeing, it's just something that kept replaying in my mind today as we were watching this, how like when people were talking about the point at which we say, oh, this is the point where we have to stand up, there isn't really, like, it's, when you hear someone like on the news, like calling out groups of people, that's already too far. So, yeah, I think it's important for us to be able to have these conversations, but try to have these conversations with as many people as we can so that they can engage with the ideas of like the realities behind what people actually experienced in the death and that process of desensitization that leads to the death. Thanks.
Hi everyone, I'm Zachary. I'm a senior in Davenport.
Zach, speak to the mic, please.
The mic. I guess first, I just want to say how moving it is to see so many people here who have all sorts of backgrounds. It's kind of crazy to be able to trace your history back, 2 generations, 3 generations, and think how people were like all over the world, and now we're kind of just like all here in this room. When I was a kid, so I grew up in Paris until I was 4, and we actually left because of anti-Semitism and moved to England. And I guess it's not often that I really appreciate what that means. And a bit later, maybe when I was maybe like 10 or so, maybe a bit older, a bit younger, my mom took me to see a film in Paris. It was had just come out in cinemas. It was called Elle s'appelait Sarah, which means her name was Sarah. And it was basically a film about a young, just married couple who move into a home in Paris and little by little discover about the history of the owners, the previous owners of that home, who were also a Jewish couple and who were deported. And you kind of see them just go down this like this history and just be kind of terrified about what happened in this home. And I was really young, and this movie really, really scared me. I couldn't sleep like for several nights or something. And I remember afterwards, I asked my mom like, why did you take me to see this? Like that was really terrifying. And I guess I'm very grateful that it's something that I was educated about very early on. And I guess, Professor, seeing your kids here today, I kind of thought the same thing. It's hard to know to understand when you're a kid, but I think it's really, really important. I guess about the film itself, one thing that particularly struck me was how you could see just buildings getting torn down and rebuilt and torn down and rebuilt. And if you, I'm European, so if you ever go around any like European cities, there will be like Holocaust memorials and like little signs and things pretty much everywhere. I forget where it is, maybe someone can correct me, but I think it's like in Amsterdam, where you have like stumbling stones, which are these like...
Stolpersteine. They're all over Germany.
And it's like these...
Austria and Holland. Yeah.
Oh wow, so they are actually...
Yeah, started in Germany. But all of this is your generation. When I lived in Germany in the 80s, there was nothing. It's all
I see.
quite recent. But
yeah, they look very new.
25 years.
I mean, basically, there are these sort of golden or like bricks in the sidewalk that kind of stand out and tell you about a family who was victims of the Holocaust who lived in the building nearby or something like that. And in some places, they're really everywhere. And it's hard to appreciate, I guess, when you're walking down these roads, like all these little blocks all around, what they actually mean. But I think it'll definitely, for me, be very different to just be wherever in Paris or any European cities I go to in the future, to just kind of be looking around the buildings and things, and just kind of like in this movie, the aesthetic of European cities is pretty much the same as here. So I think it'll definitely be very different to be looking around and seeing these very familiar-looking buildings, and thinking, like, you can only just imagine what kind of history might have gone on in there, and I guess what's kind of been hidden away. But yeah.
Is My name is Cade Napier. I'm a junior in Pearson College. I guess this made me think about a little bit about Hannah Arendt's theory about the banality of evil. I guess I see these images of the firefighters not fighting the fire. I mean, regular people who decide not to do anything, right? I mean, she was inspired by the trial of Adolf Eichmann, right? Who ran trains, but that's, you know, obviously quite substantial for this whole experience, for the whole Holocaust and everything. But, I mean, it's just about, as a lot of other people have said earlier tonight, like this evil exists around us, and it's just important to point out and everything. Thank you.
I'm going to close. So my name is Shmuley Hecht. I'm one of the founders here of Shabtai. I would like to just personally thank Professor Jason Stanley for coming, frankly, on very late notice. As we all know, this entire event was planned on late notice. It was actually inspired because on Friday night here, Shabbat dinner, a sophomore mentioned to me in passing, parenthetically, how ignorant our generation is of the Holocaust, and we should be doing something about it. And I went home, and it was Shabbos. I don't turn my computer on Shabbos, but as soon as Shabbos was over, I got on the computer and said, okay, this week is Kristallnacht. We need to do something about it. And fairly rapidly, we sent out a fairly, what we call a Shmuley Hecht Blitz email, which is, if you've been within 3 blocks of this mansion, you're getting an email from me, as I joked. And the members of Shabtai decided to host this tonight. So I want to thank you, Professor Jason Stanley, for being here tonight, for sharing personal thoughts. I want to thank the members of Shabtai for, of course, always making sure that the events here are done well. I'd like to, of course, thank Toby for speaking passionately and so on point about the evening. I also want to thank each and every one of you for being here tonight. And I just personally think it's important that we did this. A few very, very brief comments. The Jews of Germany thought they were more German than the Germans. The Germans reminded the Jews that they were Jews. Jews are different. They cannot assimilate. And the world reminds us of that over and over and over again. On that note, we're all different. And our differences should make us stronger and prouder. The Jew is perhaps the icon of difference in the world. It has been historically for thousands of years. Read history. So at a time that we talk about unity and diversity, it's a moment for women, for blacks, for Jews, for gays, for communists, for atheists, for intellectuals, for artists, for the blind, for astronauts and scientists and doctors and handicapped and greats to stand up for our differences. I watched the second plane hit the Twin Towers on 9/11 in the Owl Shop with Ben Karp, who's the founder, the real founder of Shabtai, the architect of this institution. I said, Ben, what do you think? He said, after the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, shortly thereafter, the Emperor of Japan said, I'm afraid we've awoken a sleeping giant. It ended in Hiroshima and Nagasaki with the atomic bomb that killed 200,000 innocent people to end a war that was killing tens of millions. A few weeks after 9/11, Ben and I were having a conversation, and we discovered the extraordinary fact that 19 people who are committed to a cause will change the world forever. 20 years later, we're still taking our shoes off every time we go to the airport. 19 people. Billions of times we've taken our shoes off. Billions. 19 people. So I'm going to end tonight on a high note, a really high note. I'm going to send out an email tonight to everybody that's in this room. I have absolute confidence and belief that the 25 or 30 people sitting in this room can and will change the world for the good. The final solution, the extermination of world Jewry, was planned by a small group of Germans. And 6 million Jews died. A small group of Germans got together and planned the final solution. 9/11, 19 people. 19 courageous people who actually believed in something. Terrible, evil people. The 25 or 30 of us that are sitting in this room, I'm going to send you an email tonight. And we're going to make a vow, a collective vow in our hearts and in our souls and in our minds, that we are going to change the world for good. Each of us in our own way. I've been on this campus for 25 years. A lot of things happen in 25 years. It's 20 years since 9/11. That's our generation. 75, 80 years since the Holocaust. In 20 years from now, I'm going to recirculate the email. And the challenge tonight to each and every one of us, after a Kristallnacht gathering, I believe the only in-person Kristallnacht gathering in Connecticut. The challenge for us is to change the world for the good. Billions and billions of times. Imagine if we make the vow, the commitment tonight in a little house on the edge of Yale's campus to change the world for good. That in 20 years from now, we will not believe what we've accomplished. For ourselves, for our families, for our communities, for those that are like us, and for those that are not like us. And it starts with one little, cute little thing that I do, for which my children always harass me. They always say, "Tal, what are you doing?" When I see a car on the side of the highway with their hazards on, I always call 911. I know that I've saved lives doing it. I don't know who they are. I'll never know. Don't wait for somebody else to call 911. To echo one of the great themes of tonight's talk, the underlying theme, perhaps, that we all talked about was that it's not the big, big, big thing. It's the small thing. It's the one and the one and the one and the one. So we're going to make a commitment in our hearts and in our souls and in our minds tonight to change the world in our way. And that's why we got together tonight. And we should celebrate the night that we launched our response to Kristallnacht to better the world for all of mankind in our way, individually, hence collectively, hence globally, and hence eternally. Thank you for being here.